The hallway smelled like disinfectant and something else I couldn't name. Something that clings to places where people go to be forgotten. My daughter's heels clicked against the linoleum. Sharp, rhythmic, already moving away from me before she'd even let go of my hand. "You'll love it here, Mom," she said, not meeting my eyes. "They have activities, bridge on Thursdays, a garden." I wanted to tell her I didn't play bridge, that I was allergic to marigolds, that I'd raised her in a house with a garden, and she never once helped me plant a single seed. But the words stayed locked behind my teeth, heavy as stones. She signed the papers at the front desk while I sat in a wheelchair I didn't need. The administrator smiled with too many teeth, the kind of smile that's been practiced in a mirror. "Mrs. Patterson will be very comfortable here," she said, like I wasn't sitting right there, like I'd already become invisible. My daughter, Rachel, my only child, the girl I'd carried for 9 months and loved for 63 years, pulled out her phone. "I have a meeting," she said, glancing at the screen. "But I'll visit soon, next weekend, probably." Probably. That word hung in the air like smoke. She kissed my forehead, and her lips felt cold. Or maybe I was the one who'd gone cold. It's hard to tell the difference when your whole world is shifting beneath you. When the person you'd die for walks away and doesn't turn around. Not even once. I watched her through the glass doors, watched her get into her silver Mercedes, the one I'd helped her buy when she got that promotion 3 years ago. Watched her adjust her rearview mirror, check her lipstick, pull out of the parking lot like she was leaving a grocery store, not her mother. The administrator wheeled me to room 247. Second floor, east wing, overlooking the parking lot. I could still see the empty space where Rachel's car had been, an empty space shaped exactly like abandonment. "Here we are," the woman chirped, unlocking the door. "You'll have a roommate, Dorothy. She's lovely. A bit hard of hearing, but lovely." The room was small. 2 beds, 2 nightstands, 1 window with curtains the color of old dishwater. Dorothy was asleep, or pretending to be. I couldn't blame her. What else was there to do in a place like this but pretend? They left me there. Closed the door. And for the first time in my life, I understood what it meant to be truly alone. Not widowed alone, which I'd been for 5 years. Not empty nest alone, which I'd felt when Rachel went to college. This was different. This was being erased alive alone, the kind that makes you wonder if you ever mattered at all. I sat on the edge of the bed, not my bed, just a bed, and looked at the small bag Rachel had packed for me. 3 nightgowns, a cardigan, my blood pressure medication. Not a single photograph, not one memory she thought I'd want to hold on to. That's when I knew. This wasn't temporary. This wasn't just until we figure things out. This was where I was supposed to disappear. The sun was setting outside my window, turning the parking lot gold. Somewhere in this building, a television was too loud. Somewhere else, someone was crying. And I sat there, 73 years old, and made a decision that would change everything. I wasn't going to disappear. Not like this. Not without them knowing. Not without the world seeing exactly what she'd done. Sometimes the only power you have left is the power to vanish on your own terms. If you've ever felt invisible, subscribe to this channel and tell me what city you're listening from right now. Because this story, it's just beginning. They had a schedule at Sunset Meadows. That's what they called it, Sunset Meadows. Like we were all just peacefully grazing toward death. Breakfast at 7. Lunch at noon. Dinner at 5:30. Because apparently, old people don't deserve to eat after dark. I learned the rhythm in 3 days. Learned which nurses actually looked at your face and which ones looked through you. Learned that Dorothy, my roommate with the cloudy eyes and hearing aids she refused to wear, had been there for 4 years. 4 years. Her son visited every Christmas. Just Christmas. "He's busy," she'd say, arranging and rearranging the single card he'd sent last year. He has a family. As if she wasn't family anymore. As if being old meant you'd expired, like milk. Rachel called on day 4, not to visit, to call. There's a difference. How are you settling in, Mom? Her voice was bright, performative. I could hear traffic in the background, the whoosh of her life continuing without pause. Fine, I said. That's great. Listen, I can't make it this weekend. Jason has a soccer tournament. But soon, okay? Love you. She hung up before I could respond. Before I could tell her that I didn't even know she'd signed Jason up for soccer, that I'd been his grandmother for 12 years, and suddenly I didn't know anything about him anymore. That love sounded different when someone was trying to hang up quickly. I sat there, holding the phone they'd given me, a cheap flip phone, like I was a child who couldn't be trusted with technology, and something inside me crystallized, hardened into purpose. That night, after Dorothy fell asleep with Wheel of Fortune still playing on her television, I got dressed. Not in my nightgown, in real clothes. The cardigan Rachel had packed. My own shoes. The comfortable ones I'd worn to her wedding, back when she still wanted me there for important moments. The East Wing door had a keypad. I'd watched the nurses punch in the code a dozen times. 4723. It played a little song when you got it right, like you'd won something. The night air hit my face like a baptism. I wasn't running away. Not yet. I was testing. Seeing if anyone would notice. Seeing if I could. I walked to the perimeter fence, where the landscaping ended and the real world began. There was a gap, where the chain link didn't quite meet the hedge, probably left by some other ghost who'd tried to escape their slow death. I stood there for 20 minutes, just breathing air that didn't smell like institution, and not a single person came looking. That's when I understood. I could vanish right now, tonight, and it would be morning, maybe longer, before anyone noticed. They'd assume I was sleeping, or in the bathroom, or already dead in some corner they hadn't checked yet. The invisibility I'd feared. It wasn't coming. It was already here. I went back inside that night. Punched in 4723, listened to the victorious little beep, climbed back into my narrow bed. But something had shifted. I'd stopped being the woman who waited for phone calls and weekend visits that never came. I'd become something else. Something quieter. Something dangerous. Over the next few days, I watched everything. Learned everything. The shift changes. The blind spots in the hallways. Which exit door didn't trigger an alarm because the sensor had been broken for months and nobody cared enough to fix it. I made friends with Margaret in room 219, who'd been a seamstress and told me about the donation bin in the basement, full of clothes left behind by residents who'd moved on. I made friends with Richard, the janitor who worked nights and never asked questions, just hummed old gospel songs while he mopped. I became pleasant, cooperative, invisible by choice, not circumstance. And on day 12, a Tuesday that dawned gray and unremarkable, I left. Not dramatically, not frantically. I simply put on 3 layers of donated clothing, took the $47 I'd hidden in my pillowcase, and walked out through the service entrance while Richard was emptying trash in the West Wing. I walked until Sunset Meadows was just a low building on the horizon, until my feet ached and my breath came hard. And then I kept walking. Because here's what they don't tell you about being forgotten. It gives you a freedom nothing else can. When nobody's looking for you, you can become anyone. And I had plans. Oh, I had plans. The public library on Maple Street opened at 9. I was waiting on the steps at 8:45, wearing a donated jacket that smelled like mothballs and someone else's life. The librarian was young, maybe 25, with kind eyes and a name tag that said Emma. She looked at me the way you look at everyone's grandmother, with automatic gentleness, assuming I needed help finding the large print mysteries. I need to use a computer, I told her. She smiled. Of course. Do you have your library card? I didn't. I'd had one, once, back when I was still a person who belonged somewhere. But Emma didn't make me feel small about it. She set me up as a guest user, showed me how to log in, asked if I needed help with anything else. No, honey, I said. I'm fine. I wasn't fine. I was something beyond fine. I was purpose wrapped in flesh and old bones. Rachel's Facebook profile loaded slowly, the way everything does when you're using public Wi-Fi and borrowed time. Her privacy settings were lax. She'd always been careless about things like that, never imagining that someone might want to see her life who wasn't welcome to it. Her last post was from yesterday. A photo of Jason at his soccer tournament, all grass stains and gap-toothed grin. The caption, "Wouldn't miss this for the world. Chak's proud mom. Soccer season, Chak's family first. Family first." I stared at those words until they stopped being language and became just shapes, just lies arranged in a pretty order. She'd posted it at 10:30 a.m. The same morning she'd been too busy to visit me. The same morning I'd been eating institutional oatmeal in a building full of people waiting to die. I scrolled through her feed. 2 months of carefully curated happiness. Beach vacation. Date nights. Jason's school play. Her promotion celebration. Not one mention of me. Not one photo. I'd been digitally erased before I'd physically disappeared. But there were other things there too. Things she'd been careless about. Posts tagged with her location. Check-ins at her favorite restaurants. Photos with metadata showing exactly when and where they were taken. A whole map of her life, laid out for anyone who cared to look. I'd never been good with technology. But grief and rage are excellent teachers. I created an email account, one she wouldn't recognize, couldn't trace. I joined Facebook, not as myself, but as Carol Thompson, a pleasant-looking stock photo with no friends and no history. I learned how to screenshot, how to save, how to document. 3 hours passed like 3 minutes. Emma checked on me once, asked if I wanted water. I thanked her, meant it. She had no idea she was helping me build evidence, build a case, build a reckoning. By noon, I had everything I needed. Dates, times, proof of her shining, happy life continuing without interruption. Proof that she hadn't just forgotten me. She'd been too busy for me on purpose. I logged out, cleared the browser history the way Emma had taught me, walked back out into the October afternoon. I'd been gone from Sunset Meadows for almost 24 hours. Had anyone noticed yet? Had anyone called Rachel to say her mother was missing? I found a diner 3 blocks away. Spent $8 on coffee and pie I didn't want but needed. You have to buy something if you want to sit somewhere. And I needed to sit. Needed to think. The waitress brought me a newspaper someone had left behind. Local news. Obituaries. And there, in the bottom corner of page 3, a small article. Sunset Meadows Care Facility under review for safety violations. I read it twice. The facility had been cited for inadequate staff-to-resident ratios, for door alarms that didn't work, for a pattern of resident monitoring concerns. They were already failing, already negligent, and I'd slipped through their fingers like water. The question wasn't whether they'd notice I was gone. The question was how long it would take, and what Rachel would do when they finally told her. Because here's the truth about being forgotten. It's only permanent if you stay disappeared, if you let them write the ending. But I wasn't finished with my story yet. I left the diner as the lunch rush started, found a Goodwill 2 miles away, and bought clothes that fit better, a small backpack, a prepaid phone, paid with my dwindling cash, and felt each dollar like a countdown. By sunset, I was back at the library. Emma was still there, closing up. "Did you find what you needed?" she asked. "I did," I said. "Thank you." She smiled, and I wondered what she saw. An old woman, probably. Someone harmless. Someone's sweet grandmother who'd gotten confused and lost track of time. She couldn't see what I was becoming. What happens to love when it finally stops begging and starts demanding to be seen? They found out on day 14. 2 full weeks of me eating from shelter meal programs, sleeping in a church that left its basement doors unlocked, washing up in public restrooms. 2 weeks of me existing in the margins of a city that didn't see me, hadn't seen me for years. Maybe ever. I know because I was checking Rachel's Facebook every day from the library, and on day 14, her post wasn't about Jason's soccer, or her perfect marriage, or her corner office with the view. It was about me. "Please help," it began. "My mother has been missing from her care facility for 2 weeks. We just found out today." There was a photo, not a recent one. It was from 5 years ago, from David's funeral. My hair was darker then, my face fuller. I was wearing the black dress I'd later donated, because I never wanted to feel that particular grief again. Eleanor Patterson, 73, suffers from confusion and may be disoriented. Confusion. Disoriented. I read those words sitting at Terminal 7 in the Maple Street Library, and something inside me that had been cracked finally shattered clean through. I'd raised her by myself after her father left. Worked 2 jobs to keep her in private school. Sat through every dance recital, every parent-teacher conference, every tear about boys who didn't deserve her. I'd been sharp enough to manage a household, wise enough to give advice she'd taken, capable enough to build a life. But now that I was inconvenient, now I was confused, disoriented, reduced to adjectives that made my disappearance more palatable. Poor old thing, probably wandering around, doesn't even know her own name. The post had 63 comments already. Praying for her safe return. How scary, sharing now. Have you contacted the police? Rachel's response. Yes, we filed a report. The facility is investigating how this could have happened. We're doing everything we can. We. As if she'd suddenly remembered she had a family member worth looking for. As if she'd spent the last 2 weeks searching, instead of finding out today that I'd been gone. I scrolled through her previous posts. Soccer tournament, date night, client dinner. Her life had continued, uninterrupted, while I'd been erased. While nobody had checked on me closely enough to realize I wasn't there. My hands were shaking. Emma asked if I was okay. I told her I was fine, and we both knew it was a lie. That night, I didn't go back to the church basement. I went to a 24-hour drugstore and bought a notebook and a pen with the last of my cash. Found a booth in a McDonald's that didn't kick you out if you nursed a coffee for hours, and I started writing. Not a letter. Not an explanation. A record. My name is Eleanor Patterson. I am 73 years old. I am not confused. I am not disoriented. I am a woman who was abandoned and then blamed for vanishing. I wrote about the day Rachel left me. About the weeks before, when she'd grown impatient with my presence in her guest room, with my grief that was taking too long to resolve, with my needs that didn't fit her schedule. I wrote about Sunset Meadows. About Dorothy's son who only visited on Christmas. About the broken door alarm. About the nurses who saw through us like we were already ghosts. I wrote about walking out. About the 2 weeks they didn't notice. About becoming Carol Thompson on Facebook so I could watch my daughter perform concern for an audience while never actually looking for me. I wrote until my hand cramped. Until the words blurred. Until I'd documented every moment of my erasure in ink that couldn't be deleted or edited or reframed. Because they were writing a story about me. Confused, disoriented, vulnerable old woman who wandered off. And I was writing a different story, one where I had agency, where I had truth, where I was seen exactly as I was, not diminished, not dismissed, not disappeared. The McDonald's closed at 2 a.m. I folded my notebook, tucked it in my donated backpack, and walked out into a city that was finally starting to look for me. But they were looking for the wrong woman. They were looking for someone who needed saving, and I was someone who needed to be heard. Sometimes being found isn't about coming back. It's about making them see what they lost. If you're still listening, hit that subscribe button. There are people who need to hear this, and I'm not done talking yet. I saw my reflection in a storefront window at dawn and didn't recognize myself. 2 weeks of sleeping in church basements and public parks had changed me. My hair was gray-white, wild. My face was thinner, sharper. My eyes looked back at me with something I'd never seen there before. Not fear, not confusion, power. I looked dangerous, and for the first time in years, maybe in my entire life, I didn't try to make myself smaller. The city was waking up, joggers passing, buses groaning to stops, people flowing toward their coffee and their schedules and their children who still knew their names. I stood there on the sidewalk with my backpack and my notebook and my fury, and I was invisible. But now I was invisible by choice, invisible as strategy. Rachel's Facebook post had been shared 347 times by morning. The comments kept coming. Has she been found? My mother has dementia. This is my worst nightmare. The facility should be held accountable, Rachel responded to a few. Professional concern. Careful words. She'd always been good with words, my daughter. Knew exactly what to say to make people think well of her. She'd learned it from me, back when I still believed that being good and quiet would keep you loved. There were news articles now. Local coverage. Elderly woman missing from care facility. Family desperate for answers. Desperate. That's what the headline said. But the article included Rachel's quote, "We're hopeful someone will recognize her and help bring her home." Home. As if Sunset Meadows had ever been that. As if she'd built me a home in her life before deciding I didn't fit in it. I was sitting in the library again. Emma was starting to recognize me, starting to ask gentle questions I deflected with grandmother smiles, when I saw the news segment. Channel 7, the local morning show. Rachel was on television. She was wearing navy blue, serious color, trustworthy color. Her hair was perfect. Her makeup was camera-ready but understated. She'd been media-trained, probably, back when she first made Partner. She knew how to perform empathy. "My mother means everything to me," she said, her voice catching just slightly. "We're praying for her safe return. If anyone has seen her, please call the number on your screen." The anchor was sympathetic. "How is your family holding up?" "It's been difficult. Especially for my son, her grandson. He keeps asking when Grandma is coming home." I watched my daughter lie on television, watched her rewrite reality with tears she could turn on at will. Jason hadn't asked about me in months. She'd stopped bringing him to visit before she put me in Sunset Meadows, saying it was too sad for him to see you this way. This way. Grieving. Aging. Inconvenient. But now I was a tragedy. Now I was a grandmother whose absence mattered because it made her look bad. I closed the browser, sat there in the fluorescent library lighting, and felt something harden in my chest. Not hatred. Something colder than that. Something like clarity. She wasn't looking for me because she loved me. She was looking for me because people were watching. I spent that afternoon walking. Through neighborhoods I didn't know. Past houses where families lived. Lives I'd never touch. A woman walking her dog smiled at me. A man waiting at a bus stop nodded. They saw me, but they didn't see me. They saw an old woman. Someone's harmless grandmother. Not someone who was building evidence. Documenting neglect. Planning exposure. I found a FedEx store on 4th Avenue. Paid $12 to print and scan documents. My notebook pages. Screenshots I'd saved on the library computer to a USB drive Emma had helped me buy. The post-dated receipts from my blood pressure medication. 2 refills that Sunset Meadows had never picked up, meaning they hadn't been monitoring my health the way they'd promised Rachel they would. I made copies, put them in envelopes, addressed one to the State Health Department, one to Channel 7 News, one to Rachel herself. I didn't mail them. Not yet. This wasn't about revenge. Not exactly. It was about something more fundamental. It was about making them look at what they'd done. About refusing to be the story they wanted to tell. Tragic victim, confused old woman, burden that wandered off. I was writing a different ending. That evening, I went back to the church with the unlocked basement. Pastor James was there, setting up for Wednesday night service. He was young, maybe 40, with kind eyes and a worn Bible. "Need a warm place?" he asked, not unkindly. "For tonight," I said, "if that's all right." "Stay as long as you need." He paused. "We have dinner after service if you're hungry." I wasn't hungry, but I sat through the service anyway, listening to him talk about the Good Samaritan, about seeing people others walk past, about mercy. Mercy. I turned the word over in my mind like a stone, examined its edges, wondered if Rachel had earned it, wondered if I owed it to her anyway, because she was my daughter, because I'd loved her first, because blood is supposed to mean something. But then, I thought about Dorothy's son, who visited once a year, about Margaret's daughter who called every 6 months, about all the children who'd learned to perform love while practicing abandonment. And I thought, maybe mercy isn't about forgiveness. Maybe mercy is about truth, about exposing systems that let people disappear, about making sure the next old woman isn't as easy to forget. After service, I ate dinner in the church basement, meatloaf and mashed potatoes and green beans. The food of my childhood, back when I was someone's daughter, not someone's burden. Pastor James sat across from me. "You're welcome here," he said. "No questions." I nodded, finished my meal. And that night, sleeping on a cot in a church basement, I dreamed of my daughter's face when she finally understood what she'd done. Not when she found me, but when she realized I'd been watching her the whole time. They escalated the search on day 17. I know because the news was everywhere. Rachel did another interview, this time with more tears, more carefully chosen words about how much she loved me, how desperately she wanted me home safe. She'd hired a private investigator, posted a $5,000 reward, created a Find Eleanor Facebook group with 2,000 members who'd never met me but were emotionally invested in my rescue. I joined the group, as Carol Thompson, read every post, every theory. Maybe she has memory issues and doesn't remember who she is. I hope she's not scared. The family must be going through hell. Hell. As if the last 2 weeks had been hell for Rachel. As if she hadn't been living her life exactly as planned while I'd been sleeping in churches and eating at soup kitchens and bathing in public restrooms. But here's what they didn't know. Here's what Rachel didn't know. I'd been documenting everything. The library had become my office. Emma had stopped asking questions, just smiled when I came in, saved Terminal 7 for me like it was my desk. I'd learned more about technology in 2 weeks than I had in 73 years. Desperation is a hell of a teacher. I'd saved every post Rachel made, every news article, every timestamp proving that she'd lived 2 full weeks without noticing I was gone, that Sunset Meadows had gone 2 weeks without proper resident checks, that nobody had loved me enough to notice my absence. I'd documented the broken door alarm, the understaffing, the medication mismanagement, everything that made my disappearance possible. And I'd written letters, dozens of them, to the state health inspector, to local news stations, to elder advocacy groups, to every person and organization that might care about an old woman who'd been warehoused and forgotten. But I hadn't sent them. Not yet. Because timing matters. Impact matters. And I'd learned enough about Rachel's career, To know her firm was pursuing a major client, a hospital system that would care very much about being associated with someone whose mother was missing under mysterious circumstances. I'd learned that from her Facebook, from her professional network, from the digital trail she'd carelessly left for anyone who bothered to look. She'd taught me once that you don't play a card until you know it will win the hand. I was just following her advice. On day 18, I went to the police station. Not to turn myself in. Not exactly. I walked in wearing my donated clothes and carrying my backpack, and I asked to speak to whoever was handling my case. The desk sergeant looked at me skeptically. "Your case?" "I'm Eleanor Patterson," I said. "I believe you're looking for me." The room went silent. Then chaos. Officers appearing from nowhere, asking questions, radiating concern that hadn't existed when I was just another old woman taking up space in a facility. They put me in a quiet room, brought me water. A female officer sat across from me with gentle eyes and a notepad. "Mrs. Patterson, are you all right? Are you hurt?" "I'm fine." "Can you tell us where you've been?" "Walking, thinking, existing." She wrote that down. "Did anyone hurt you? Take you somewhere against your will?" "No." "Are you confused about what happened?" There it was. That word again. Confused. "I'm not confused," I said clearly. I walked out of Sunset Meadows on October 1st, through the service entrance. The door alarm was broken. I walked out, and nobody noticed for 2 weeks. She blinked. Nobody noticed? Nobody checked on me closely enough to realize I wasn't there. My daughter didn't visit. She didn't call the nurses to ask about me. She didn't know I was gone until the facility finally realized and told her. "Mrs. Patterson, I'm not confused," I repeated. "I'm clear. Probably clearer than I've been in years. I just needed everyone to see what I already knew." "What did you need them to see?" "That I'm not visible until I'm gone." She didn't write that down. Maybe she didn't know how. They called Rachel. I heard the conversation through the door, Officer Martinez speaking in low tones, saying they'd found me, I was safe, she should come to the station. 20 minutes later, Rachel burst through the door. She looked perfect, as always. But there was something in her eyes now. Something like fear. "Mom." She rushed toward me, tried to hug me. I didn't move. "You're okay. Thank God you're okay." I looked at her. My daughter, my only child, the person I'd loved more than my own life. "I've been okay the entire time," I said quietly. "I just wasn't with you." Her face flickered, confusion. Then something like anger. "Do you have any idea what we've been through? The worry? The searching?" "No," I said. "Tell me. What was it like? Those first 2 weeks when you didn't notice I was gone?" The room went very still. Rachel's mouth opened, closed. She looked at Officer Martinez, as if expecting support, protection from this question. The facility didn't tell me. You didn't ask. You didn't visit. You didn't call to check on me. I was busy. You posted about Jason's soccer tournament, about your date night, about your promotion. You were busy with your life. The one I'm not part of anymore. That's not fair. You put me in that place and forgot I existed. And when I walked out, through a broken door, through negligent security, through 2 weeks of nobody checking if I was breathing, you didn't notice. Nobody did. Not until it became an embarrassment. Tears were streaming down her face now. Real ones, I thought. Or maybe I'd just forgotten how to tell the difference. "I love you," she whispered. "I believe you think you do." I stood up slowly, my joints aching. But love that can't be bothered to show up isn't love, Rachel. It's guilt. And guilt only appears when other people are watching. I turned to Officer Martinez. Am I free to go? She looked between us, uncomfortable. You're not under arrest, Mrs. Patterson. You're not charged with anything, but where will you go? That's what I'm figuring out. I walked out of that room, out of the police station, into the October evening that smelled like rain. Rachel followed me to the parking lot. Mom, please, come home. Let's talk about this. Home where? The nursing home where nobody noticed I was gone? Or your house, where I was a burden you finally found an excuse to get rid of? That's not... I was trying to do what was best. For who, Rachel? For me? Or for you? She didn't answer. Couldn't answer, because we both knew the truth. I started walking. Didn't look back. Behind me, I heard her crying. Heard her call my name. But I kept walking. Because here's what I'd learned in 2 weeks of being invisible. Sometimes the people who love you need to see what life looks like without you. Need to understand that you're not a problem to be solved or a responsibility to be managed. You're a person, and people deserve to be seen. I didn't go back to the church that night. I went to a motel, the kind that takes cash and doesn't ask questions, and I spent $40 of my last $53 on a room with a bed and a lock and privacy to think. The room smelled like cigarettes and bleach. The bedspread was the color of old bruises. But it was mine. For one night, it was a space that belonged to me. I sat on that bed and opened my backpack, pulled out the notebook. The flash drive with screenshots, the printed emails and posts and photos that documented everything. And I pulled out the envelopes. The ones I'd already addressed, already stamped, already prepared. One to the Illinois Department of Public Health. One to Channel 7 Investigative Reporting. One to the elder law attorney whose name I'd found online, who specialized in nursing home negligence. One to Rachel. I laid them out on the bed like tarot cards, like they could tell me my future. Or maybe they already had, and I just needed to decide if I had the courage to make it real. The letter to Rachel was handwritten. 3 pages of everything I hadn't said in that police station. Everything I'd swallowed for months while living in her guest room, feeling her impatience, her resentment, her relief when she finally found a solution to the problem of me. Dear Rachel, it began. I'm writing this because I need you to understand what you did. Not what you think you did. Provide care for your aging mother who'd become too much to handle. But what you actually did. You erased me. I'd written about the day she stopped asking about my grief. About the weeks she'd spent researching care options, while I pretended not to notice. About the morning she'd told me, so gently, that Sunset Meadows would be better for me, as if exile could be gift-wrapped in concern. I'd written about the hall that smelled like disinfectant and abandonment. About watching her walk away. About 2 weeks of nobody noticing I was gone because nobody had really been seeing me for a long time. I don't know if you meant to hurt me, the letter said. I don't know if you understand that you did. But I need you to know that I see you now. I see the daughter who loves the idea of having a mother, more than she loves the actual work of it. I see the woman who performs family for an audience, but can't be bothered when nobody's watching. I'd ended it simply. I forgive you, but I don't know if I can forget, and I don't know if I want to. I held that letter for a long time, felt its weight, imagined her face when she read it. Then I sealed it. Sealed all of them. At midnight, I left the motel. Found a 24-hour post office. One of those automated stations where you can buy stamps from a machine and drop mail in a slot. Nobody to see you. Nobody to ask questions. I stood there with those envelopes in my hand, and I thought about consequences. About what would happen when the health department read about Sunset Meadows' broken alarms and missing medication checks. When the news station saw documentation of a woman who'd been forgotten for 2 weeks. When the attorney reviewed evidence of systematic negligence. About what would happen when Rachel read her letter and understood that I'd been watching her perform grief while I documented the truth. I thought about Dorothy, still in room 247, still waiting for her son's Christmas visit. About Margaret and all the others who'd been warehoused and forgotten. About the next old woman who'd walk through those doors, trusting her children, trusting the system, trusting that being human meant you'd be treated like one. I dropped the envelopes in the slot. One by one, they disappeared. Each one a small act of defiance. Each one a refusal to stay silent just because speaking up wasn't convenient for the people who'd made me invisible. The last envelope, Rachel's, I held for an extra moment. My daughter, my girl, the child I'd carried and raised and loved even when love became a weight she didn't want to carry back. "I'm sorry," I whispered to the envelope, to her, to the ghost of who we used to be. "But you need to know." I let it go. Walked back to the motel through streets that were empty except for the occasional car, the distant sound of sirens, the hum of a city that never fully sleeps. I felt lighter. Not happy. This wasn't happiness. But free. The kind of freedom that comes from finally telling the truth. Even when the truth costs everything. Back in my room, I couldn't sleep. I lay there watching headlights slide across the ceiling, thinking about tomorrow. About what would happen when those letters arrived. When the investigation started. When Rachel realized her mother hadn't been confused or disoriented, just clear-eyed enough to document her own abandonment. My phone buzzed, the cheap prepaid one I'd bought at the drugstore. A text from a number I didn't recognize. "Mom, please call me. We need to talk. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Rachel." I stared at those words. Sorry. That word that means everything and nothing, depending on whether it comes before the consequences or after. I didn't call her. Instead, I turned off the phone, pulled the thin motel blanket up to my chin, and for the first time in months, maybe years, I slept without dreaming, without carrying anyone else's weight, without being anyone's burden or anyone's tragedy. Just Eleanor. Just me. Sometimes the only way to be seen is to stop performing the role they wrote for you. Subscribe if you understand what it means to rewrite your own ending, because this story, we're just getting to the good part. The health department showed up at Sunset Meadows on day 21. I wasn't there to see it, but the news was. Channel 7 had received my packet, documentation, timeline, photographs I'd taken on my phone of the broken door alarm, the understaffed wings, the medication cart left unattended in the hallway. They'd sent a reporter, Julia Chen, the one who did investigative pieces. I'd watched her stories from the library, elder fraud, nursing home abuse, systems that failed the vulnerable. She was good. She cared. Or at least she was good at seeming like she cared, which was more than most people managed. The story aired on the evening news. I watched it from a different library, not Emma's kind sanctuary on Maple Street, but a larger branch downtown where nobody knew me, where I could be anonymous among the homeless men checking email and the students studying for exams. State inspectors made a surprise visit to Sunset Meadows Care Facility today, Julia Chen's voice said over footage of serious-looking people in suits carrying clipboards. This comes after allegations of systematic negligence from an anonymous source. Allegations that may explain how a 73-year-old resident went missing for 2 weeks without detection. They showed the exterior of Sunset Meadows. It looked smaller on television, less threatening, just a building. But I could smell that hallway just by looking at it, could feel the weight of being left there. Julia Chen interviewed the administrator, the one with the practiced smile. She wasn't smiling now. "We take resident safety extremely seriously," she said, her voice tight. "This was an isolated incident, and we're cooperating fully with the investigation." Isolated incident. As if I was the only one. As if Dorothy and Margaret and all the others were being vigilantly watched, lovingly cared for, treated like people instead of problems. The camera cut to a nursing home advocacy expert, a woman with gray hair and fierce eyes. 2 weeks is unconscionable, she said. It suggests a fundamental breakdown in care protocols. Residents should be checked multiple times per shift. The fact that Ms. Patterson could leave and remain undetected for 14 days indicates serious systematic issues. They showed my photo, the old one from David's funeral. I looked sad in it, diminished. Nothing like the woman I'd become. Eleanor Patterson was reunited with her family 6 days ago, Julia Chen said, but questions remain about the conditions she left and why it took so long for anyone to notice she was gone. The piece ended with a hotline number for elder abuse reporting, with Julia Chen's serious face promising to continue following this developing story. I sat back in the library chair and felt something vast and complicated. Not triumph. This wasn't about winning, but vindication, maybe. Proof that I hadn't been crazy. That the things I'd seen and experienced and documented were real, were wrong, were worth exposing. My phone buzzed. Still off, but I'd turned it on just to see. 17 missed calls from Rachel, 23 text messages. Mom, please, we need to talk. I didn't know it was that bad there. I'm so sorry. Please come stay with us. Jason misses you. That last one made me angry. Using my grandson as leverage. Using his love, if he even felt it anymore, after months of her keeping me away from him. As manipulation. I didn't respond. Instead, I checked Rachel's Facebook. She'd gone quiet. No posts in 3 days. The Find Eleanor group was still active, but now the comments had shifted. Wait, she was missing for 2 weeks and nobody noticed? That nursing home should be shut down. Where was the family? That last comment had 34 likes. Someone had replied to it. Right? My mom calls her mother every single day. Rachel hadn't responded to any of them. She'd stopped performing for her audience because the story had changed. She wasn't the devoted daughter desperately searching anymore. She was becoming the woman who'd put her mother in a place where she could disappear. I should have felt satisfaction. Maybe I did. But mostly I felt tired. The kind of tired that lives in your bones, that comes from carrying weight too long and finally setting it down. That night, I didn't go back to any motel or church. I went to a women's shelter, St. Anne's, run by nuns who asked your name, but not your story. They gave me a bed in a room with 5 others. Gave me a meal of beef stew and bread that was fresh and warm. Gave me dignity in a way Sunset Meadows never had. Sister Margaret, she told me to call her Maggie, sat with me while I ate. You running from something or toward something? She asked. I thought about that. Both, maybe. She nodded like that made perfect sense. We've got room as long as you need it. No time limits. Just respect and showing up for meals. What do you want in return? She smiled. Nothing. That's not how grace works. Grace. That word again. Different from mercy. Different from forgiveness. Grace meant I didn't have to earn my space here. Didn't have to perform or please or prove I was worth the room I took up. I'd forgotten what that felt like. That night, lying in a twin bed with clean sheets in a room full of women who'd also run from something, I made a decision. I wasn't going back to Rachel's house. Wasn't going to accept her guilt-driven invitation to stay in her guest room while she tried to rebuild an image that was already crumbling. I wasn't going back to Sunset Meadows. They'd called, left messages, tried to convince me to continue my residency, with promises of better care, as if promises meant anything from people who'd let me disappear. I was going to build something different, something mine, for however many years I had left. In the morning, I'd start looking for a room to rent. A job, maybe. Something small. Something I could do. I'd use my voice, tell my story to whoever would listen. Not for revenge. For change. so the next Dorothy or Margaret wouldn't have to wait for death in a place that had already forgotten they were alive. I fell asleep to the sound of other women breathing. Different ages, different stories, all of us refugees from lives that had tried to erase us. And for the first time since David died, I felt like I belonged somewhere. Not because someone loved me, but because I'd finally learned to stop abandoning myself. Rachel found me at St. Anne's on day 28. I don't know how. Maybe she'd hired that private investigator to keep looking. Maybe someone had seen me, recognized me from the news, made a call. Maybe mothers and daughters are connected by something deeper than memory, some thread that doesn't break even when you want it to. I was in the common room, helping Sister Maggie sort donations, winter coats for the women who'd need them when the temperature dropped. My hands were busy, my mind quiet. I'd found a rhythm here, a purpose that didn't require performing for anyone. Mom. I looked up. Rachel stood in the doorway, smaller somehow than I remembered. Her perfect clothes looked rumpled. Her hair wasn't styled. She had circles under her eyes that makeup couldn't fully hide. How did you... Does it matter? She took a step closer. I've been looking everywhere. I needed to see you. Sister Maggie glanced at me, questioning. I nodded. She left us alone, but not before squeezing my shoulder. A gesture that said, whatever happens, you have a place here. Rachel and I stood there, 5 feet of distance that felt like miles. The news story, she said finally. The investigation, the letters. That was you. It wasn't a question. Yes. You documented everything, saved my Facebook posts, proved that her voice cracked. Proved that I abandoned you. I proved that you forgot me. There's a difference. Is there? She sank into one of the donated chairs, threadbare, mismatched, nothing like the furniture in her perfect house. Because it feels the same from where I'm sitting. I put down the coat I'd been folding, looked at my daughter, really looked at her, and saw something I hadn't expected. Not anger, not defensiveness, just devastation. The firm asked me to take a leave of absence, she said quietly. The hospital system client pulled out. They said they couldn't be associated with someone who'd neglected their parent. My boss suggested I deal with my family situation before returning to work. I felt something twist in my chest. Not quite guilt. Not quite satisfaction. Something more complicated. Jason asked me why Grandma ran away from us. Her eyes were wet now. He asked if it was because of him, if he'd done something wrong. And I didn't. I couldn't explain it in a way that didn't make me the villain. Rachel. No. Please. Let me. She took a shaky breath. I've been thinking about what you said. About love that can't be bothered to show up. And you're right. I did that. I got busy with my life, with my career, with being the person I thought I was supposed to be. And you became inconvenient. After Dad died, you were grieving too loud, too long. You needed too much. And I just wanted you to be okay without me having to do the work of helping you get there. Tears were streaming down her face now. Real ones. The kind that come from somewhere deeper than performance. I put you in that place because it was easier than having you in my house, reminding me that you were sad and I didn't know how to fix it. I told myself it was for your own good, that you'd have company, activities, care. But really, I just wanted you somewhere where your pain wasn't my responsibility. The words hung between us. Truth, finally, the kind that cuts clean through. And then you were gone, she continued. And at first I was angry. Angry that you'd embarrassed me, that you'd made me look bad, that you'd complicated my life even more. But then I read your letter. The one you sent me. You got it. I got it. And I've read it probably 100 times. And every time, I see something else I did wrong, something else I missed. Some moment where I chose myself over you and told myself it was fine because you'd understand. Because you're my mom, and moms are supposed to understand everything. She looked at me then, really looked at me. But you're not just my mom. You're a person. You're Eleanor. And I forgot that. I forgot you were anyone except the role you played in my life. I sat down across from her. My knees were aching. They always ached now. And I was tired. But I needed to hear this. Needed to know if her remorse was real or just another performance. I can't undo what I did, Rachel said. I can't give you back those weeks, or the months before when you were living in my house feeling unwanted. I can't fix Sunset Meadows or make it so you were never forgotten. But I can. I can try to do better, if you'll let me. What does better look like, Rachel? I don't know yet. I just know it's not putting you somewhere so I don't have to see you. It's not checking in once a week and calling it love. It's not performing daughter for an audience while actually being whatever I was. She reached across the space between us, not touching, just reaching. I know you're angry. I know you have every right to be. And I know that saying sorry doesn't fix anything. But I am sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry I made you feel invisible, that I made you prove you existed by disappearing. I looked at her hand, hovering there in the space between us. Looked at my daughter's face. My girl, who I'd loved before I understood what love would cost, what it would demand, how it could fail and still refuse to die. I don't know if I can come back from this, I said honestly. I don't know if we can. I know. But I also don't want to spend whatever time I have left hating you, or punishing you, or making you carry the weight of my hurt. What do you want? I thought about that. I want you to see me, not the mother you wish I was, younger, easier, less complicated, but me, Eleanor. A woman who is 73 years old and flawed and sometimes difficult and still worth showing up for. I do see you. I finally do. Do you? Or do you see the news story? The embarrassment? The problem you need to solve so you can go back to your life? She flinched. But she didn't look away. Both. I see both. And I don't know how to make the first part matter more than the second. But I want to learn. If you'll teach me. We sat there in that room full of donated furniture and other people's cast-offs, and something shifted. Not forgiveness. That would take time, if it came at all. But possibility. The smallest opening, a hairline crack in the wall between us. I'm staying here for now, I said. At St. Anne's. Sister Maggie says I can stay as long as I need. Okay. And I'm not ready for you to visit regularly, or for Jason to come. Not yet. Okay. But you can call, once a week, Tuesday evenings, and we can talk. Actually talk, not you asking if I'm okay and me saying yes and both of us pretending that's enough. Tuesday evenings, Rachel repeated. I can do that. She stood up, hesitated, then moved toward me, and this time I didn't pull away when she hugged me. She smelled like expensive perfume and desperation and something else. Something like hope, maybe, or its more careful cousin, determination. I love you, Mom. I know you do, sweetheart. I just need you to prove it. She nodded against my shoulder. Then she left. And I sat there in the common room of St. Anne's shelter, surrounded by the debris of other people's lives, and felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Not happiness. Not yet. But the beginning of something like peace. Because here's what I'd learned. Sometimes love isn't enough. Sometimes you need the people who love you to actually do the work of loving. To show up not when it's convenient, but when it's hard. Not when people are watching, but when nobody is. And sometimes you have to disappear to teach them how to find you. If this story is hitting somewhere deep, subscribe now. Leave a comment telling me what city you're listening from, because there are people who need to know they're not alone in this. And there's one more chapter left to tell. 6 months later, I stood in a small apartment on the 3rd floor of a building that had seen better days, but still had good bones. 1 bedroom, a kitchen with enough counter space to make real meals, a window that looked out over a park where children played and old people sat on benches feeding pigeons. It wasn't much, but it was mine. Sister Maggie had helped me find it. Had connected me with a social worker who helped me apply for housing assistance, navigate Medicare, access resources I hadn't known existed. Had taught me that asking for help wasn't weakness, it was wisdom. Rachel had co-signed the lease. That had been hard for both of us, me swallowing pride, her proving trust. But she'd showed up with the check, helped me move in my donated furniture, didn't try to decorate or control, or make it into something that matched her aesthetic. "It's perfect, Mom," she'd said, and I'd believed she meant it. Our Tuesday evening calls had turned into something real. At first, they'd been stilted, careful, both of us navigating new territory, learning how to talk to each other as people instead of roles. But slowly, the distance closed. She told me about her job, her marriage, her fears about being the kind of parent who'd someday be on the other side of this story. I told her about Saint, Anne's, about the women I'd met there, about learning that invisibility was sometimes a choice you made, and sometimes a violence done to you. We'd driven past Sunset Meadows once together. It had been closed down pending investigation. The building looked smaller than I remembered. Less like a prison, more like what it was, a failed system. A place where people had been warehoused because society didn't know what else to do with its elders. "I'm sorry I put you there," Rachel had said, staring at the empty parking lot. "I know. That's not enough, is it? Knowing? No, but it's a start." Jason visited me now, once a month on Saturday afternoons. Rachel brought him but didn't hover, let us build our own relationship instead of the one she'd scripted. He was 12 now, all elbows and questions and a laugh that sounded exactly like his grandfather's. "Grandma, why did you leave the nursing home?" He'd asked me one afternoon, eating the cookies I'd learned to make in my new kitchen. I'd thought about lying, about giving him a child-safe version, but I'd spent too long performing to start again now. "Because nobody there saw me," I'd said, "and I needed to be seen." He'd nodded like that made perfect sense. "Mom says you're brave." "Your mom said that?" "Yeah. She cries sometimes when she talks about you. But she says you taught her something important." "What's that?" "That people aren't problems to solve. They're just people." I'd hugged him then. This boy who was growing up in a world I'd helped change just a little, just by refusing to disappear quietly. The investigation had taken months. Sunset Meadows had lost its license. 3 staff members were fired. New regulations were passed about resident monitoring, about safety protocols, about the ratio of staff to patients. It wasn't enough. Nothing ever is. But it was something. Julia Chen had done a follow-up story. "Where is Eleanor Patterson now?" She'd interviewed me in my apartment, asked about my experience, about what I wanted people to know. "I want families to understand that aging parents aren't burdens," I'd said, looking directly at the camera. "They're people. People who deserve dignity, who deserve to be seen, who deserve better than being stored away and forgotten." The story went viral. Not because it was unique, but because it was universal. Comment sections filled with people sharing their own stories, of parents put in homes and rarely visited, of grandparents who'd been erased from family narratives, of the quiet epidemic of elder abandonment that nobody wanted to talk about. I got letters, dozens of them, from daughters who recognized themselves in Rachel, from mothers who saw themselves in me. From people who said my story had made them call their parents, visit their grandparents, reconsider what family meant. I'd answered every single one. Now, 6 months later, I was sitting in my apartment on a Tuesday evening, waiting for Rachel's call. The phone rang at exactly 7. She was never late anymore. "Hi, Mom." "Hi, sweetheart. How was your week?" I told her about the book club I'd joined at the library, Emma's library, where I was now a regular, where Terminal 7 would always feel like mine. Told her about the advocacy work I'd started doing with elder rights organizations, telling my story at conferences and community meetings. Told her about the life I'd built from the ruins of the one that had tried to erase me. She told me about Jason's basketball game, about a difficult case at work, about learning to ask her mother-in-law how she was really doing instead of assuming fine was the truth. "I'm proud of you, Rachel." Silence. Then quietly, "Thank you. That means thank you. I love you, you know, even with everything. Especially with everything. I love you too, Mom, and I promise I'll keep showing up, not just when it's convenient, but really showing up. I know you will, baby. I know." After we hung up, I stood at my window watching the park. An old woman was on a bench feeding pigeons. She was alone, but she didn't look lonely. She looked peaceful, like she'd made her peace with solitude, had learned to be enough for herself. I wondered if she had children who visited, if she'd been forgotten and found her way back, or if she'd never been lost at all. I wondered if anyone saw her, really saw her, and I made a mental note to visit that park tomorrow, to sit on that bench, to ask her name, to see her, because that's what this whole thing had taught me. Not that families are cruel, or that aging is a tragedy, or that institutions will always fail, but that being seen is a radical act, that refusing to disappear is revolutionary, that sometimes you have to leave to teach people how to welcome you home. I'd disappeared for 2 weeks, and in those 2 weeks, I'd found something I'd lost decades ago, maybe had never had at all. I'd found myself, not the mother, not the widow, not the burden or the problem or the old woman who'd outlived her usefulness, just Eleanor, 74 years old now, still flawed, still difficult sometimes, still learning how to take up space without apologizing for it, still here, still seen, still telling my story. The sun was setting over the park, turning everything gold. In my kitchen, the kettle whistled. I had tea to make, a book to read, a life to live that belonged to me and nobody else. I'd been missing for days before they noticed, but I'd been invisible for years before I disappeared. And now I was finally, beautifully, defiantly visible. Not because I'd been found, but because I'd refused to stay lost. If this story moved you, if you've ever felt invisible or known someone who has, subscribe. Leave a comment telling me what city you're listening from. Share this with someone who needs to know they're seen. Because every single person deserves to be more than a memory, more than a problem, more than someone's burden. They deserve to be witnessed, honored, loved with action, not just words. And sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is refuse to disappear quietly into someone else's story. Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for hearing Eleanor. Until next time.